Good morning. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. That's 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Joining us now, James Herson. It's been a while, sir. Good to have you back.
Hey, Happy New Year, Kevin.
I love talking to you. It's been a long time because we can talk about social and cultural issues. So here's the Kevin Miller softball to start off, sir. Where are we culturally in America?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that what's happened, we still have a cultural crisis in America that's been building up for a long time, and it centers around attacks on American institutions such as the family, marriage, concept of patriotism. But we're focused right now, I think, as a culture on the issue of sovereignty and the understanding of what a nation state is and what attributes a nation state should have. And there's a clash between people who are intellectual elites who don't believe in the concept of a nation state, and they've written that, talked about it for decades. They believe it's a thing of the past. And so it's centered now around the southern border of the United States, where the people who do not believe in a nation state want to abolish the whole notion of an orderly regulation of people entering the country, and they want to have so-called open borders. And people who feel that a sovereign nation cannot be a sovereign nation without regulating its borders. And it seems like that's become a cultural issue as well as a political one, because it affects so many aspects of life. And it's just and that's the moment we find ourselves in at the beginning of 2019 with the government shut down, with an absolute, what appears to be an absolute impasse between two sides who want completely opposite results. And I think it defines the year. And this notion that we're divided is just something that is true. We are a divided nation, divided between, we're divided geographically because on the coasts and the metropolitan areas, there is a different America than there is in most of the country. And we're divided on the issues of what are important, what priorities are important as a country, and it's going to determine the direction of this country and whether it even continues.
What about the popular culture? You know, recently we were looking back at the life of the captain and Tennille, and the music today, sir, I don't know what it is. It's Itchy and Scratchy and Billy and Willie, and I can't understand it.
Well, there is, the popular culture is a reflection of the values and the sentiments of the people in a given culture. And in Western culture, led by the United States, popular culture has degraded. There's been a form of cultural pollution, mainstreaming of pornography, celebrating novels and movies that are pornographic, celebrating extreme violence, celebrating extremely dark and dismal fare that's not entertainment. And, of course, our culture has been degraded by the news media basically completely failing the chief mission of news media, which is to bring accurate information to the people, instead bringing lies, and entertainment media purporting to communicate news, the late night shows, and the panels on MSNBC tell the American public the same thing. And of course, similarly, the morning talk shows like The View and even the morning shows like Good Morning America and the Today Show communicate, again, exactly the same talking points that you would see on a panel on CNN or MSNBC. So, but you talk about music, and that I made a living in the music business for a long time before I ever went to law school, and I played with I was on the road with Temptations for several years. I'm very familiar with the degradation in the music world, led by the hip hop and rap artists who just basically have, not in all cases, but in most cases, have the ultimate misogyny and anti-decency kind of profanity in their lyrics. And but there's always good. I have to say, there's always good. People yearn for good songs, for example. And so there are people like Ed Sheeran, Bruno Mars, some of Lady Gaga's stuff she did with Tony Bennett. But there are still good songwriters and songs being produced, but you have to kind of search for them. Similarly, in the pop culture, we yearn for good stories and storytelling. It's something that I believe is innate in us. And so there's always good storytelling, and the talented storytellers in Hollywood are forced to give us good storytelling. But perhaps the best is in the family-friendly animation movies that actually follow the same storytelling formula that established Hollywood in its golden era.
James Hurston joining us, jameshurston.com. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Of course, Hollywood a little different now than it was in the golden era. Let me hit you with this one. Has LeBron James taken over Hollywood? You have Mr. James recently saying, you know, the NFL owners are a bunch of old white guys on the plantation. I'm paraphrasing, to be fair to Mr. James. And then saying he's the greatest ever. And I'm thinking to myself, he came from very humble beginnings, and he's truly an American success story. But the need to, I guess, attack the very institutions that helped him create this great wealth and influence.
Yeah, I mean, he's. I feel bad for LeBron, a very talented athlete, and a completely ignorant person that doesn't know what's going on, and ignorant with his own career because, it's significant. I know he feels a tremendous amount of success. He's getting a big salary, but Father Time catches up with athletes, and Michael Jordan doesn't play anymore, but he still earns a tremendous amount of money from endorsements. LeBron James keeps going this way. He's not going to get much in the way of endorsements. So I think he is the product, and he's getting some really bad advice by attacking a portion of the people that are going to be his customers. And so it's really a shame, but he's embraced the stupidity of the Hollywood community politically. And, this is part Hollywood. You see their award shows, the ratings going down. Late night shows, ratings are a fraction of what they used to be. The industry is fragmented, and people, you just don't sell products and services by insulting the people that you're selling them to. That is very ignorant and stupid, and conventional wisdom in Hollywood, going all the way back to its birth. Samuel Goldwyn's told an assembled group of filmmakers, I don't want you to be sending a message. If you want to send a message, don't use movies, use a telegram. And that was by saying that that's not our job. And it's true. And so same thing with sports. People don't want to watch the Lakers to hear LeBron spout off on politics. They want to see him slam dunk and dole out assists and win. And the same thing happened. The NFL ratings went down when they catered to this Colin Kaepernick copycat bunch who were disrespecting American ceremonial institutions and our national anthem. ESPN's falling down, and its trend continues to go down, and it deserves to go down because it's tried to insert political commentary. The vast majority of people that watch ESPN are men who want to see the latest news about their favorite teams, and they're not interested in hearing political commentary. And so, this is just, it doesn't even get to the point where you argue, I'm a conservative, and I find most of the stuff that celebrities and athletes say idiotic, but from the point of view of their business, it's profoundly stupid to do, and it's self-sabotaging. But one of the problems that of becoming famous, and part of my work, I've had the opportunity to represent people who are famous, is they're surrounded by yes people who, whatever they say, whatever they want to do, there's this entourage that tells them it's great. And you can't have that as any human being, because you need friends and family to tell you when you're wrong. But you need advisors to tell you when you're wrong. If you don't have that, you're going to end up going the wrong direction. And that's why so many of these dolts in Hollywood, I mean, as Rob Reiner is like, he's running out of language that he can use to insult the president. So it's every day, it seems like he gets more and more shrill. I think he's going to find himself with a very, very small audience of people that listen to him. His character, Meathead, was a lot smarter. I think his latest thing is he's using malignancy and cancer a lot to describe the president. We have to remove the malignancy and the cancer. And then now he's saying that, the Democrat House will remove this malignancy and cancer from the White House. And of course, he's wrong, because they will not. And even if they do successfully impeach the president, the Constitution requires him to be removed by a 2/3 vote in the Senate, and that would mean 20 senators who are Republican would have to join the Democrats. Now, we know we got some people like Mitt Romney who will join the Democrats, but they're not going to get 20, and it's not going to happen. So, but anyway, that's the way the entire media basically fans the flames in terms of CNN and MSNBC in particular, because they have decided to abandon, as I said, their mission, and no longer are they engaged in truth-telling, but they're engaged in hyperbole and picking stories only if they relate to harming President Trump. And if you go into an airport, that's the only time I would watch CNN, is accidentally. But you look at the Chyron, which is the little label on the bottom of the screen, and it's always 24/7 bashing President Trump or a story that would hurt him. So, in other words, a child dying who was trying to enter the country with one of these caravans, that will be a story they will pick. A child dying because the child was killed by a drunk driver, illegal alien who should have been deported and wasn't because of sanctuary city policy, that story is ignored. And that's the way our situation is. And if it, but the amazing thing is that people are inured to it, and they realize the game, and it's not working with enough Americans, because you can tell by the president's approval rating, which hovers in the high 40s or even sometimes hits 50%. And with this kind of coverage, which has been going on for 2 years, and the late night shows hitting them for 2 years, and the Hollywood celebrities hitting them for 2 years, we've never seen anything like it, and it's obviously not working. It's amazing. His ratings are very similar to what former President Obama's ratings were at the same point, and former President Obama had the opposite kind of media coverage, which was 24/7 adulation. And instead of selecting stories that hurt him, they buried every story that hurt him, to the point where members of the Obama administration could actually appear on television shows with straight faces, claiming that their administration was, quote, scandal-free, close quote. And anyone who's been paying attention knows that the 8 years that Obama was in the White House were the most scandal-filled years ever in the country's history. And, the scandals, justice wasn't done.
Right.
And now we know about the unmasking, the fraudulent defrauding FISA court judges to get warrants. We know what happened with the IRS scandal. We know what happened with basically weaponizing almost every branch of the government.
Sure.
We know that we had a president tell us with his basic legacy bill, went around the country, repeated over and over again, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan. Looked us in the eyes and blatantly lied to us, and is still agilized. I noticed today one of the people that chooses the winners of the Nobel Prize, Sweden, he now is publicly saying he regrets giving Barack Obama a Nobel Prize.
Of course, that won't be picked up. That won't be picked up probably across the country. More with James Herson next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Our great friend, James Herson, joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, jamesherson.com, talking all things cultural and of value, sir. Good to have you with us.
Good to be with you.
You know, in the old days, and James, I've interviewed you in several markets and throughout my 24 years now in radio, you know, it almost seems like we're going the way of the dinosaur, cultural, social conservatives. How do we get it back, or am I being paranoid?
Look, I think it's absolutely a miracle that social conservatism thrives, and it does thrive. It thrives in places like Boise. It thrives across this country, and it even thrives within the constituents of the Democrat Party, because they're basically outsourcing the vote, bringing people in from other countries. But as those people progress in our second and third generation, we begin to find out, the Hispanic community has a very profound family value culture. There's been some degradation there, and people throughout the country. I mean, look at our voluntary military. It is a miracle that we have these young men and women who have decided to sacrifice and go serve their country and enlist. And we're not running out of that. We're having it happen. Now, that's a sign that at least a portion of social conservatism is alive. I'll tell you another thing, because I wrote an article about this. Hollywood has been very worried. The executives have been worried because of the fragmentation, because of the streaming, because of a downtrend in the box office of movies. And all of a sudden, at the end of 2018, they were unexpectedly met with the fact the box office went up. And it went up for the first time in a couple of years, and the audiences actually went up. And the thing that dominated the box office were superhero movies. And we know about this. The Marvel comics, the DC comics, superheroes. It dwarfs the rest of the films in terms of box office. The top 5 films, 4 superhero movies. The top 10 films are all either superhero movies or sequels. And there's a reason for that. Part of the reason is, of course, we still have intact families or segments of families all throughout the country. We have parents and kids. Parents are desperate to find a place to take their kids. And if they're aged appropriately, you can take them to a superhero movie. And in many cases, the parents can enjoy it too, because they're familiar with the characters from when they were kids and they read comics. Or they're just, they want to be entertained by the CGI, the computer-generated imagery that's on there. But there's a deeper reason, and that has to do with something that human beings long for in good storytelling. They long for tales that are told that take place in a universe that has justice in it, where their moral tensions that occur in the story are resolved. And we see that in Shakespeare plays, Greek tragedies. We see it in every story throughout history that's successful. And superhero movies generally have that quality. it's good and evil are clearly seen. And yes, there's a dark night of the soul and there's problems and tensions, but justice emerges in there. And there's even an empirical study that comes out of Japan where researchers showed animations to 6-month-old infants who couldn't speak. And in one set of animations, there's a character that bumps another character unfairly, and a third party intervenes as a hero. And in another set, the bump takes place unfairly and the third party doesn't do anything. And they dress them in a way so that they can confront the 6-month-old infants with real-life replicas of the characters they saw, and they're automatically drawn to the hero. They can't speak, but they know who the hero is. And it led the researchers to believe that the recognition of heroism is innate. It's in us. Before we can speak, it's already there. It's built in. Now, my view as a theist, I believe that the universe has purpose, that it was created, and that we are creations, and therefore we were hardwired to reflect justice and morality because that reflects the character of the creator of the universe. And that's supported by this research. And that, in the end, is why ultimately pop culture that is successful has those elements. He's really successful, that becomes phenomenal and lasts. And so I think that's the reason that we have the superheroes. So I have hope and optimism in a culture that's degrading because I believe that there's that spark inside of us that we have hardwired from a creator that still gives us hope.
More coming up with James Herson. You can check him out at jamesherson.com. Kevin Miller in the morning. Traffic and weather together, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. With us once again, our great friend James Herson, talking about superheroes and certainly things of value. You know, what do you make of the change in culture, James, when we see and maybe I'm just an old, out-of-date guy. You remember the Jeffersons and All in the Family and Sanford and Son, and I guess those were parodies, and some say they were unflattering. When I worked for CBS, they accused me of being racist for playing the Jeffersons theme, and I'm going, are you kidding me? It's a classic. It was great. And now we have Blackish. We have these other shows where we have, the white guy's the dummy with the latest Cedric the Entertainer show. And is that good for America? Am I missing something? Because I'm thinking this is not what I consider entertainment. Are we out of touch?
No, they're out of touch. That's that fragmentation that I talk about. But when you mentioned, I thought you were going to go in this direction. Those are the Norman Lear shows that you were mentioning. And those shows could not be on today because the hyper-political correctness that we have would not allow them to be shown. And that's what you're talking about, seeing on TV, this crazy political correctness that creates that the highest value is mindless diversity, and that certain people can be depicted as idiots and be persecuted, and it's okay because they're supposedly the majority that has the power. So that's white men. You can do anything you want with white men, anything with the Christian religion, anything with the Catholic religion. And so it's this kind of thing that we see. No, it's grossly unfair, and it's out of touch with most Americans, and particularly Americans that are not in the bubble that Hollywood lives in or the bubble that Manhattan lives in. So, I think that's the way that goes.
But what impact does that have on the young people that may be watching this? Again, here's the old quote-unquote white guy thing. You couldn't have a show called Whitish, yet you have a show called Blackish. And when I first saw this, I'm thinking, I hope this doesn't last. To me, it doesn't send a message of inclusion. Going back to your thoughts, it's, well, if you're in the majority, you're you're dumb, you're stupid, and we're going to make fun of you. So that's a platform for other people to do it in their own lives.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's unfortunate that it seeps in there, but it comes from the same value system that favors a so-called affirmative action, which is a racist concept. It favors this kind of ignoring merit-based systems of promotion and in companies, and changing the character of companies based on some kind of quota system. It harms the country. It weakens us.
James Harrison, we have to have you back. We appreciate you, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and Happy New Year to you and your listeners.
Let's find out what's happening in your world. Good morning, Maggie. And good morning, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, 103. Well, I was going to say 103.57. I don't know what I'm thinking. It must be the guest in with me, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. KIDO Talk Radio, Phil Hardy joining us. Phil, good to have you with us.
Always a pleasure, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
So here we are. A Happy New Year to you and to your family.
Happy New Year.
It's been a wild 2 years in Washington for you, working for Strategies 360, getting a lot done. But now Washington changes. Can you give us a little history of the last 2 years with a Republican House, Republican Senate, how it's going to be different?
Well, clearly it's going to be different because we no longer have control over both bodies in Congress. Now, we really barely had control over both bodies in Congress before, because the Republican Party is really quite fractured, as we all know. The Freedom Caucus, who I actually do respect a lot of the principles by which it stands upon, forced the Republican Party to constantly need to call up Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and say we need some votes to pass key pieces of legislation, which means a lot of the Republican agenda was compromised to begin with. So what are we looking at now? We have Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and Anastasia Ocasio-Cortez, 29-year-old woman from Queens, New York, running the House of Representatives. Now, I really mention the latter's name most significantly because she's going to be in this new role. The Democrats have this very, very literally socialist wing of their party that's been elected with all of these new 63 freshmen. I think what we're going to start seeing, and this is really ironic, is the leadership of the Democrats in the House of Representatives calling up the Republican minority and saying, hey, we need some votes to get some things passed, because I don't think the Democrats are going to have the votes on their own. We're really looking at, I believe, a return to what we had in 2011 when the Republicans first took control of the House. The Democrats still had the Senate and the presidency, except now it's going to be the Democrats in control of the House, the Republicans in control of the Senate, and the Republicans, obviously, in President Trump, controlling the White House. I think it's going to be a lot of gridlock. And frankly, you know, for the inside the Beltway people that I associate with, the writers from the Washington Post and whatnot, you know, they think that a Congress that doesn't pass a lot of bills, doesn't pass a lot of laws, is a bad Congress. I think we in the West and we in Idaho understand that a Congress that does the least is doing the least bad. So I'm not so upset about them not being able to pass a bunch of new laws. And let's be clear, Nancy Pelosi and her Democrat friends are not going to get a lot done in Congress.
Well, there we have it, our great friend Phil Hardy. So which party self-implodes first, the Republicans or the Democrats?
Well, I think that there is, you know, this is a really interesting question, Kevin. A lot of the more quote-unquote moderate Republicans, or the Republicans who had been there for a long time, have left the body. But by the same token, a lot of the young firebrands have also left, the Raul Labradors. You know, there's a few others that escape my mind at the moment. But there are some significant other people who have been, you know, at the forefront of really challenging Republican orthodoxy, who just got fed up and went home. So it's really a combination of more conservative members and some people who are just, you know, the Mike Simpsons, who are, to most East Coast people, would be very conservative, but in reality is quite pragmatic. So I think that the Democrats are going to have to try and really shore up what they're trying to do in order to get things passed. And then once they get over to the Senate, they're probably dead on arrival. So it's really going to be, let's to be honest, I think really what we're looking at here is how many more judges we can get put onto courts because we have control of the Senate, and that's how that works.
Our great friend Phil Hardy joining us, but it's interesting. Do you think we could ever see one day here at KIDO Talk Radio where we're not talking about two political parties, but possibly four, where you have these elements that split off from each other?
Well, we essentially do have four parties at the moment, but it's impossible to get elected with anything but a D or an R next to your name until some sort of seismic thing happened. And frankly, most of your listeners probably don't remember this, but it already almost happened. Ross Perot already tried to start a third party, and he got pretty far by the standards of the day. But it's all gone now. So really, you have people, the pejorative is rhino, and now the D's have their dinos, Democrat in name only. It's just like Bernie Sanders. He couldn't run for president as an independent, so he ran as a Democrat, even though he's not a Democrat. So we do have four parties in Congress. We have the ultra-conservatives, the Freedom Caucus. We have the Democratic Socialists, or the Progressive Caucus. Then we have the Republicans and the Democrats.
Right. It's just fascinating. How do you think Speaker Pelosi is going to run things? Thinking about what happened to the Republicans, considering John Boehner basically got run, Paul Ryan, people are, still mad about Paul Ryan. So you take a look at Madam Pelosi. I mean, most of these cats were run on that she wouldn't be the speaker, and lo and behold, Nancy wins again.
Let's be perfectly clear about one thing. Nancy Pelosi is a master of what she does. She's a master legislator. She's a master parliamentarian. She's a master strategist. I really have to take my hat off to her ability to organize and run and command her caucus. I don't agree with her principles on how she wants to govern, but how she actually can control the unwieldy body that she's been managing to do all these years is truly remarkable. And she will be only, I believe, the second speaker to have been speaker and come back and be speaker again. I think Sam Rayburn, was the only other. He's got buildings named after him in Washington, D.C. So I think she's going to do just fine to a certain extent, but in the end, she's going to have the same things happen, just as you said now, that happened to John Boehner and that happened to Paul Ryan. She's going to become marginalized. She's already said she's only going to serve a maximum of 4 years. I think that by then she'll be 82 years old. There comes a point where you have to ask, why do you even want this when you're 82 years old?
Well, you could say that, but I mean, why, Phil? You're in Washington. You see those folks.
I'm not 82.
But you hang out with them. I mean, you see them. We watch them on TV or hear them on the radio. You see these people that, most of us at that age, we're retired, we're hanging out, but these people get in their suits. Look at Orrin Hatch, just retired. A lot of folks. Jesse Helms, Strom Thurmond, they had to wheel him out physically.
He was 103.
Yeah.
I know. So she's a spring chicken at 82 in a couple of years. I don't think she's going to enjoy it as much as she did in the past. When she was speaker last, when they had control of the Senate and had 60 votes, they could get anything they wanted through under President Obama. This is why we're in the situation we are now. They took it too far.
Well, will they take it too far with impeachment? That's one thing we'll talk about with our great friend Phil Hardy joining us. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. That's 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So this is a new experience for you. You're still kind of a newcomer in D.C., although probably doesn't feel like it to you. You came in with the Trump revolution. Now you've got to deal with the libs in the House.
Well, it's not my first go-around in Washington. Obviously, it was there in 2011 with Representative Labrador. But yes, in a nutshell, I have never personally worked in the political arena in the minority. When I worked here in Idaho, we had massive supermajorities in the legislature, and when I went in with Raul, we had the majority in the House. So it's going to be a really unusual experience, not only for me, but for people like Congressman Fulcher, who's already learning he's going to have to make a lot of friends even on the other side of the aisle if he wants to get anything done while he's there. But, to be completely frank, there's been many instances where in the work that I personally do in D.C., we have worked with Democrats. Because when you get out west, there are conservative Democrats, and they all face by some of the same things, and they can agree on some issues.
A conservative Democrat?
There are a few.
Now, you're a smart guy, and I'm not being the usual snarky, pithy Kevin Miller here. I have a lot of respect for you. as you may or may
Well,
not
thank you.
know.
Thank you,
But
Kevin.
I mean, give me an example of a conservative Democrat in the West.
I'm going to tell you right now, Kirsten Sinema, who just was elected to the
Hold
United
on.
States Senate.
Who?
Kirsten Sinema,
From?
Arizona. She's replacing Jeff Flake.
She's a
Flake.
conservative, right? Isn't she probably not a social?
She's really rebranded herself. She comes from a very liberal background, but
Right, yeah.
She only voted with her party 60% of the time.
Like the bait and switch. I promised to be like the people that voted said they were going to vote against Pelosi, and Pelosi's in, huh?
No, I think
Can't trust the libs.
It's a little bit different,
Devious little libs.
She's in Arizona. She knows it's a conservative state, and she has, picked out certain positions that are consistent with conservative voters in Arizona. So that is a perfect example of someone who has an excellent staff that we've been able to work with. And frankly, if I can get someone to vote with me 40% of the time that's a Democrat, it's very hard. You wouldn't see most Republicans like Raul Labrador or most any conservative Republican.
Well, you bring up Congressman Labrador's name a lot, former Congressman Labrador a lot.
Former Congressman Labrador. Well, I think it's honorable to refer to them by that.
Congressman.
Yeah, former congressman.
Right.
Yeah.
They always have that title.
They do, and they
Sure.
have privileges that come with it.
Like?
I'm not sure.
But it sounded good.
Well, I think in the Senate they do have floor access. I think in the House they do too.
Yeah. You watch House of Cards when it was good.
Oh yes.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress. Phil Hardy joining us here, and we'll get to all your former bosses.
We don't need to do that if we don't want to, but we can.
What do you mean? I just said we would.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, is this the what you do? And you spin people? Is that how that works?
That's part of my job.
I see. Phil Hardy joining us. So, what about impeachment? Oh, wait a minute. Before we get to that,
Sure.
you know Donald Trump.
No, I do not. Well, I know him from what we know.
Look, we have creative license in this program.
Okay. Yes, I do.
You know Don. Well, I was talking about Don Jr.
Oh, Don Jr., very nice man.
So, how do you think they're handling the craziness?
From everything that we've ever heard, and goes back years, Trump thrives on having a team of rivals and people who duke it out in front of him. He likes lots of contestants on his show. So I think that this is the way he wants things to be. And I think the next 2 years you're really going to see Trump unchained, whereas the first year was Trump chained. Second year, still in some chains. Now the chains are off. And he's going to proceed the way he goes by his gut. And frankly, I think it hasn't all been proven right, but his gut is generally right. I think he's obviously winning the war against China on trade. We have to let these things run their course. I think that he's going to be as unpredictable as he was in the previous 2 years, but even more so potentially.
All right, our great friend Phil Hardy joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Coming up, we are going to go back to the politics of impeachment because I believe we'll be hearing a lot about that. Also, we'll take your phone calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So everybody's moved out of their offices. Is there just like this breathless anticipation?
Oh, no, it's much more, it's different than that. Everyone's in their offices now. Some offices were scheduled to be repainted and recarpeted, and all the hallways in December, were just filled with all of the furniture. Literally, it looked like you were evacuating the entire building. All the furniture is going back in. It's almost all in place. Most people have hired their staff, the majority of their staff, and they're, had their swearing in receptions, and they're just trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, waiting for their committee assignments if they haven't got them yet, and some of them have not. And it's chaos. There are votes. But it's going to take a while. It's usually about the end of January before people really figure out what they're supposed to be doing. Not that they know what they're doing, but what they're supposed to be doing.
More with Phil Hardy next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. It's such a treat to have Phil Hardy with us from Strategies 360 on winter break, if you will, getting ready to get back to the grind. When you're in Washington, you're right near the Capitol. What reminds you of Idaho?
Almost nothing, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah, unfortunately, almost nothing. Obviously, where I work and where my office, my home, and the Capitol is a completely urbanized environment.
Your home east of the Great River.
Yes. It's a completely urbanized environment. There's, it's noisy. The people are unspeakably rude. they think their horn is just their way of getting back at everyone or any slight. And, people don't even use their horns in Idaho. I mean, that's oh, hey, look, stop, look out. In D.C., people just lay on their horns and just go for it forever. It's a noisy, mostly dirty, just cold, rainy. It's sort of miserable in a lot of ways, Kevin.
Right.
But I do love it.
But it is the nation's capital.
It can be beautiful.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. And you go all to the museums, and the sites are gorgeous, but you don't live on those sites. You don't work on those sites. You don't work in the Washington Monument. You don't live or work inside the Smithsonian, but you do get to walk by them periodically and go inside them to look at things and to fill your soul and recharge your batteries. I think the Library of Congress is one of the best places to do that.
Sure.
It's not really a place that most people think of going, but, I put on my Nicolas Cage persona and get my National Treasure vibe happening, and I go in there and it's just, just a fantastic, amazing, the world's biggest library.
More coming up with Phil Hardy next. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM. KIDO Talk Radio, traffic and weather together. Good morning, Dave. And thank you, Larry. KIDO Talk Radio. So let's talk a little bit about Russ Fulcher, Congressman Fulcher. Well, it sounds kind of cool to say that, Congressman Russ Fulcher.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
What do you expect from him?
Well, he's going to be a different. Obviously, everyone's different, so he's going to be different than former Congressman Labrador. He won the lottery on Office Space. He got one of the largest offices available, larger than Congressman Labrador had, larger than any other freshman congressman will get. So he's already in the plus on that. He's got a good staff.
Well, that's reassuring.
He's got a good. Hey,
that's reassuring for us here.
Actually, it is, because if you are.
This is Washington speak now.
If you're crammed into 5 or 6 people in this tiny little room, it's not the best and most conducive environment to work.
Well, it's the life they chose.
It is. But he happened to get one of the bigger ones available.
It's like people that complain about being on the radio. It's the life you choose.
Yeah, well, I do have some respect for the work you do, and
I'm glad you have some, considering how highly we think of you.
But I want to be honest with you, Kevin. The room that we're in right now, in D.C., you would have 8 or 9 people working in this space, and it's just you and me.
Well,
so
it's the life they chose.
It is the life they chose.
Right.
Yes.
It could be here in beautiful Idaho or east of the Great River in the muck.
Well, that's the life some of them chose.
So back to now that we've covered the landscaping issues of his office.
Yes.
So what do you expect from Congressman Fulcher?
Well, I do expect that he's going to work hard at finding a few friends across the aisle that have, and we spoke about this earlier, there are some conservative Democrats, Western Democrats, that will share some of the ideals that are important to Idaho, from wildland firefighting to, timber harvesting.
They haven't gotten much accomplished in the past 100 years, have they?
There are things that do. So this is the unfortunate part of politics these days. There were some actual really important bills that passed with, tremendously wide margins in Congress last year, from the opioid abuse legislation that passed almost unanimously, to sentencing reform, which passed almost, nearly unanimously by congressional standards, overwhelmingly. But the media doesn't talk about that because there was no conflict involved. So that's another one of the parts of.
I think we're getting back to what about Russ Fulcher?
Well, Russ Fulcher is going to find those like-minded people on issues that are important to him, that he might be able to get something to move as part of what the Democrats want to try. But again, it's very hard to get anything passed, So I think that he's going to have to spend his first 2, 4, 6, 8 years building up those relationships, learning how things work. They don't work the same as the Idaho legislature. He's in for big surprises. He already knows that.
Well, from what we've heard, the Idaho legislature doesn't do much work.
That's you talking, not me.
Right. I think if, it's a results-based business, and not to beat up on anybody personally, but, people run for office, they want to be elected, and now we're hearing the budget's not going to be ready. We $60 million over in the fastest-growing state. I mean, what do you want? Us not to hold people accountable?
The people will be held accountable.
Really?
The elected leaders will be.
I mean, do you really hey, but you know something? It's a new day.
We have a citizen legislature in Idaho. We can't ask these people to sit around without the tools they need to get their job done.
But do we really need them to be there every year? How did it go back to what was it? Wasn't it one time every 2 years?
Well, some states still are every 2
Right.
years. Montana's every 2 years. And a lot of states like Oregon and Washington have 1 year where it's longer and 1 year where it's 60 days. It's short. Utah the same, very short. So
If Utah can do it, why can't we? I like those people.
they have more special sessions,
Right.
Kevin.
They can knock it out real quick.
That's probably what would happen in this instance. A 1 or 2 day special session. It's
Well.
cheaper,
Right.
more efficient.
We still haven't really talked about Russ Fulcher, but we'll move on. Congressman Simpson.
Yes.
Everybody speculates that, for the last, 16 years, this is it for him. What do you think?
Now he's ranking member. He's not the chairman of his subcommittee. The only reason that I consider he would stay on after this term is he has been there long enough. He knows his counterparts very well. He's always treated them with respect. He can probably still be effective, maybe not as effective as he was, obviously, as chairman, but he can still be effective. But there does come a point when you say, I'm in the minority. I don't want to be in the minority anymore. He's been there for 20-something years. I would not hold it against the man an iota if he decided this would be his last term in Congress.
Something to look out for. What about Senator Rich, Senator Crapo?
Well, Senator Risch, obviously chairman of Foreign Relations, this is the pinnacle, of the man's career. This is his moment. There's no way he's going to let that go. I think he's there for the foreseeable future. Senator Crapo also seems to really just enjoy being a legislator. He enjoys being there to try to do good without being flashy. So if he was going to leave and make oodles and boodles of money on Wall Street, he's had so many opportunities to do that already.
I just wonder, you go back to the ages, though, and, they must really love it. The travel is tough. It's not like you live in Virginia or east of the Great River. But to really to do that when most people their ages are chilling out.
The travel is brutal. It's not uncommon at all for me to be on the same flight as Senator Risch or Senator Crapo out of D.C. to Salt Lake.
Yeah, it's the Salt Lake one, yeah.
So many other members, I see, and it's rough for me. And these guys are significantly older than I
Right,
am.
but they have staffs and you have you.
They don't have staff on the airplane.
But they schedule the flights.
Sure. I mean, that's not so hard. I mean, you can do it on your phone these days. I do everything on my phone. So
Just saying, Phil.
It's difficult, and I don't think people appropriately, understand how difficult it is. And I do know that they happen to spend more time in D.C. than former Congressman Labrador, who had a young family, would come home virtually every single weekend because he had, young kids.
You keep bringing up Congressman Labrador.
Well,
is there an issue there? We haven't really brought him up, but you keep bringing him up. I mean, are you trying to spin? I mean, we're talking about the new year, the new look, the new everything else,
So getting
Phil.
back to Congressman Fulcher,
By the way,
his family, his kids are grown.
Phil,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome. It's always great.
You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.